Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Welcome to the 14th lesson of our Simplified Tajweed series, which is a series of Tajweed lessons introduced by Quran University uniquely designed Quran learning management system with the purpose of introducing Tajweed in a modern and easy approach. Through this series of lessons, you'll be introduced to Tajweed rules using a unique, modern and innovative approach to teach Tajweed, utilizing the color codes of Mushaf al-Tajweed as a common denominator to link between those lessons and Tajweed rules. With such approach, we aim to make the understanding of Tajweed rules much easier and help you to practically apply those rules while reading the Quran. So let's start Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim with our topic for this lesson, which is Ikhfaa for Nun Sakinah and Tanween. And the Arabic name for this lesson is Al-Ikhfaa al-Haqiqi lin-Nun al-Sakinati wat-Tanween. In this lesson, we'll attempt to understand the Applied Tajweed definition for Ikhfaa, or hiding of the Nun Sakinah and Tanween, and distinguish between Ikhfaa, Ith-haar, and Idghaam. We'll learn about those letters that are associated with the hiding of the Nun Sakinah and Tanween, the Ikhfaa. And we'll take examples for Ikhfaa rule. And then we'll practice what we have learned by attempting to extract cases from the Quran and apply Tajweed rules on them. Remember what we have mentioned in our introduction about our Quran learning management system, that whether we're using the desktop version or the mobile version, in both cases we use the Ottoman script of Medina Mus'haf with Tajweed color codes, which we call Qawaid Alwan al-Tajweed, where every Tajweed rule, hukum, is given a unique color code. The objective of these color codes is to alert us to the presence of Tajweed rules while reading the Quran. Based on that, we'll link now the color used in Mushaf al-Tajweed with the hukum Ikhfaa, the rule of Ikhfaa, which is the color green. Let's look at this example. Man kana. The noon here is followed by one of the Ikhfaa letters, the kaf, and thus the rule of Ikhfaa should be applied on it. So if we look among the colors used in this Tajweed colors legend, we'll find the color green, which indicates the hiding, the Ikhfaa, or the Ghunnah. And if we search in this Quran page for a noon or Tanween, given the color green, we'll find min sharri. Min sharri. We'll find here that we pronounce the noon somewhere in between the Ith-haar and Idghaam with Ghunnah. And that's basically our lesson for today, which is Ikhfaa, which is given also the color code of green. Now, we're going to remind you with the relationship of Tanween and still Noon. So, what's Tanween and what's the relationship of Tanween and Nun Sakinah? As we said, Nun Sakinah is basically one of the letters of the alphabet with a sukun, which is still, meaning having no harakah, no movement. Now, the Tanween, it is an extra Nun Sakinah added to the end of a name, any name. And it's written in the format of duplicate Fatha or duplicate Kasra or duplicate Dhamma. So there are three types of Tanween. Tanween with Fath, Tanween with Kasr, Tanween with Dhamm. And the example is as we see here for the word Kitab. Kitab is a book. Now a book with Tanween, Fath, Kitaban, or Kitabun, Tanween Dhamm, or Kitabin, Tanween with Kasr, duplicate Fatha, duplicate Dhamma, duplicate Kasra, and it is pronounced like this: Kitaban, Kitabun, Kitabin. So basically, after the word Kitab, there is a Nun Sakinah with a Fatha on the last letter of Kitab, and that's Tanween Fath. So Nun Sakinah is basically a part of Tanween. So Tanween, the word Tanween means adding a Noon. Noon, Tanween. So thus we conclude that the Tanween adds a Nun Sakinah to the end of the word, and accordingly, same rules of Tajweed that applies for the Nun Sakinah would automatically applies for the Tanween. In the previous introduction about Nun Sakinah and Tanween, we mentioned that there are four possible Tajweed rules that would arise from the Nun Sakinah or Tanween convergence, meaning meeting with another letter of the alphabet. And those four possible rules were Iqlab, Idghaam, Ith-haar, and Ikhfaa. And we said that the rule would be based on the letter that follows the Nun Sakinah and Tanween, and in the case of Iqlab, that letter would be the Ba, and in case of Idghaam, there would be either those letters in green or the letters in gray, and we said if we have the ya, noon, mim, and waw, it will be an idgham with ghunnah, and it is mentioned in the green letters of the word yarmalun, while in the case of lam and ra, it would be idgham without ghunnah, which in turn is represented by the gray letters of the same word yarmalun. Then we talked about Ith-haar, saying that it has 6 letters, and then we talked about Ikhfaa, and we said that it would be related to the rest of the letters of the alphabet. And this lesson is going to be dedicated for Ikhfaa, which means hiding of the Nun Sakinah or Tanween. So let's start by defining Ikhfaa. Linguistically, Ikhfaa means hiding, concealment, covering. But in Tajweed science, the Ikhfaa means a light pronunciation of the still Nun, the Nun Sakinah, which is somewhere in between Ith-haar and Idghaam, yet preserving the ghunnah. With the first part, it means that we have to avoid clear exposure. We're not doing Ith-haar. And with the second part of the definition, it means that we need to keep the ghunnah characteristic while merging the Nun Sakinah with the letter after it. So why do we call it Ikhfaa? Where does the name come from? The name is indicated because we hide the oral articulation of the Nun, yet we preserve its nasal articulation. And if we remember in the lesson on articulation of letters and its characteristics, we talked about the Nun articulation and characteristics. We've mentioned that the Nun has 2 articulation zones. The first articulation zone of the Nun is oral, where the Nun is articulated at the tip of the tongue opposite to the gum of the upper incisor. Here, this is the upper incisor and this is the tip of the tongue. So the oral articulation is at this area, and the Nun is pronounced like this. Very clear by taking the tip of the tongue up to this area. And the second articulation is the nasal one, in the nasal passages, while the Nun pronounced through the nasal articulation zone would sound like this. So there is which is nasal, and in, which is oral. So the combination of the two is what gives the Nun its characteristics of nasalization with the oral articulation. Now, the Nun pronunciation is dependent on the letter that follows the Nun. The Nun is very peculiar in that whatever letters that comes after it would affect the way it's pronounced. So with certain letters, the Nun would appear clearly, and that's what we call Idghaam. While with others, it won't appear as clear, and that's what we call Ikhfaa. On the other hand, with other letters, it would be merged into those letters, and that's what we call Idghaam, merger. Or it can be flipped to a totally different letter, and it will be exchanged with that letter. Iqlab to a ba. So, in case of Ikhfaa, this one, the oral articulation is eliminated. So basically, we hide the oral articulation of the Nun. We don't pronounce the Nun from here, but we keep the nasal articulation. And that's why we maintain the ghunnah while we perform the Ikhfaa. And we had also talked about the Nun characteristics, saying it's partially loose, apparent, lowered, and open. And if you remember in that lesson on characteristics, we've mentioned that there is an intrinsic characteristics and incidental conditional characteristics. Intrinsic ones are those that are associated with the letter as a part of its makeup. Those were divided into 2. Ones with opposite, where the Nun is loud, having intermediate looseness, depressed, open, and fluent. And as a non-opposite characteristics, which are intrinsic, the Nun is characterized with ghunnah, and ghunnah is always a part of the Nun. So we cannot eliminate the ghunnah from the Nun, but we can exaggerate it, or we can decrease it, but it's always a part of the intrinsic characteristic of the Nun. Now, as a conditional characteristic, the Nun can be modified based on what's following it up, either into Ikhfaa, exposure, Ith-haar, merger, Idghaam, or Iqlab, and it can be given either haraka or sukoon, and ghunnah also can be a conditional characteristic upon exaggerating it or giving more stressing on the ghunnah compared to the natural ghunnah which comes with the intrinsic characteristic of the Nun. So, for Nun and Mim, ghunnah is a characteristic that is always associated with the pronunciation of these letters in all their conditions, and that's why we call that an intrinsic characteristic, a basic one. While in some cases you tend to probably exaggerate the ghunnah of the Nun and Mim, and in that case we call that exaggeration as an incidental characteristic. Now, after that quick revision of the characteristics and articulation points of the noon, we can go back to our definition, the Applied Tajweed definition that we have mentioned earlier, and explain what do we mean by the in-between Idhhaar and Idghaam. Idhhaar, as we said in previous lessons, it's exposing the noon articulation clearly and showing its nasalization characteristics. So both the oral articulation and the nasal articulation with nasal characteristic and ghunna will be both clear and exposed. On the other hand, when we talk about Idghaam, as we have seen in the Idghaam lesson, the total complete Idghaam. In the total complete Idghaam, we eliminate both the oral and the nasal. Both of them are eliminated completely. So there is no oral articulation, no ghunna. And then we have the Ikhfaa. We said Ikhfaa is in between. It's in between Idhhaar and Idghaam. So Ikhfaa would be somewhere in between the two definitions here. Ikhfaa, in that we will have a hiding of the noon oral articulation, yet we maintain or preserve the nasalization. The ghunna is maintained, and so we see here it is somewhere in between the Idhhaar, where both are clear, and the Idghaam, where both are eliminated. Ikhfaa is in between, oral is eliminated, yet nasal is maintained. And we had also mentioned in the definition the wording of light pronunciation. So what do we mean by that? In Idghaam, we add emphasis, shadda, where we stress the merged into letter. We make shadda of that letter, تشديد الحرف المدغم, resulting in a duplicate instances of that letter, which is the meaning of shadda. While in the situation of Ikhfaa, we avoid emphasis. In that case, we have the ghunna, but we don't do a shadda. We avoid adding a stress on the letter that follows the noon. So in summary, Ikhfaa is indicated when the noon Sakinah or Tanween is followed by one of its 15 letters. And what are those letters? They are the letters at the beginning of these words. صف ذا ثنا كم جاد شخص قد سما دم طيبا زد في تقى ضع ظالما, which means صاد ذال ثاء كاف جيم شين قاف سين دال طه زين فاء تاء ضا ظا. Now the rule, we apply light pronunciation of the still noon, the noon Sakinah or Tanween, somewhere in between Idhhaar and Idghaam, while preserving the ghunna, as we have explained in the last few minutes. And the practical instruction for how to pronounce the noon with Ikhfaa. In regard to the oral articulation, keep the tongue away from the noon articulation zone. Do not adhere the tongue to the upper gums. Direct the tongue towards the articulation of the following letter, one of those letters. And then, in regard to the nasal articulation, the nasalization characteristic, preserve that ghunna, the nasalization, by allowing the exhaled air to pass through the nasal passages. And we can apply either viralization, tafkhim, or attenuation, tarqiq, on the hidden noon. And that will be dependent on the letter that follows the noon. Some letters are viralization letters, some of them are tarqiq letter. So if the noon is followed by a viralization letter, we apply viralization to the noon, while on the contrary, if the noon is applied or followed by an attenuation letter, then we apply attenuation to the noon. Sounds a bit confusing? Don't worry, examples will illustrate that. Now let's start with the ghunna first. The ghunna duration, the nasal tone that we will preserve, should be kept at 2 time units. And now time units is something we'll describe later on when we're talking about med. It's basically how much you stretch a letter. And we relate this to haraka. We have movement of opening 2 fingers or closing 2 fingers. And that unit is relative to the speed at which you are reading the Quran. So we need to avoid exaggerating the ghunna and stretching it more than required, more than 2 units. Example of that is kuntum, kuntum. Now, if we extend the ghunna of the noon, it will sound like kuntum, as if there is a wow, a vowel intonation would appear, and that kuntum is wrong. So we shouldn't exaggerate it more than the 2 units. That is reasonable for it. Kuntum. Now, velarization. As we said, if the noon is followed by a velarization letter, which is one of those letters, then we velarize the noon. So let's listen here. من طين من طين أن صدوكم. So there's a ta. There's a ta, one of those velarization letter, and there's a sad here. So we keep the velarization of the hidden nun. من طين أن صدوكم. Now this will be more clear once we look at the opposite, at the attenuation. The attenuation, any other letter other than those would be considered as an attenuation letter. And the example is a ta. Ta is not among the khussa, ضغط and qidh, those letters. So, وَمَن تَاب, وَمَن تَاب, وَمَن تَاب. We realize that the noon is not heavy, does not have resonance, does not have depth, and is not having tafkhim, velarization. On the contrary, it is simple, it is attenuated. So, من طين أن صدوكم versus ومن تاب. We'll proceed now to much more examples that will make you understand Ikhfaa on a practical basis. These are the examples. As we said, the Ikhfaa letters are صف ذا ثنا كم جاد شخص قد سما دم طيبا زد في تقى ضع ظالما. So these letters at the red at the beginning of these words are the Ikhfaa letters. So we'll start with the side, and we'll realize that for each letter will be an example for Nun Sakinah, two examples, because one example is given for the Nun Sakinah followed by the letter in the same word, in one word, while the other example is indicating the meeting of the Nun Sakinah with the letter, side for this, for example, in two words. Now Tanween always happens in two words. And so we'll start with the first example, which is ينصرون. ينصرون. We will realize that the still noon, the Nun Sakinah, is followed by a sad in a single word. Now, if we want to apply Ikhfaa on it, we will hide the Nun Sakinah, we'll hide the Nun, and we will keep the Ghunna for 2 units. Let's listen to Shaykh al-Husri pronouncing Ikhfaa of this Nun Sakinah. The second example, من ذا الذي. Here we're taking the Nun Sakinah with a Dhal in two words. من ذا الذي. Nun Sakinah followed by Dhal with Fatha in two words. And if we apply Ikhfaa for it, we're going to hide the Nun Sakinah and going to keep the Ghunna for 2 units. As we're going to listen to Shaykh al-Husri pronouncing it like this. Another example, min thamarihi. Here the noon with a tha in 2 words. Min thamarihi. So we have a Nun Sakinah followed by a tha in 2 words, and we'll apply Ikhfaa by hiding the noon and then maintaining the Ghunna for 2 units. The next example is minkum. Kaf following the noon in 1 word. We'll see here minkum. Noon Sakinah followed by Kaf. When we apply Ikhfaa on it, we will try to hide the noon and then keep the Ghunna for 2 units. And it will sound like this. Minkum. Next example is man jaa. Noon Sakinah followed by the Jim letter in 2 words. Noon Sakinah followed by Jim in 2 words. We make Ikhfaa by hiding the noon, maintaining the Ghunna for 2 units, and sounds like this. Next example related to the Sheen, man sha. Noon Sakinah, man sha, followed by a Sheen in 2 words. We hide the Noon Sakinah and maintain the Ghunna for 2 units, and sounds like this. Another example related to the Seen and min su. Min su. Noon Sakinah follow the Seen in 2 words. We hide the Noon Sakinah and we maintain the Ghunna for 2 units, and sounds like this. Min su. One more example related to Tanween. ثَمَنًا قَلِيلًا. You're seeing here the Tanween. ثَمَنًا قَلِيلًا. Followed by a qaf in 2 words, of course. And if we want to apply the hiding of the nun sakina, keeping the ghunna for 2 units, and it will sound like this. Next example is for the dal, andada. We realize here that the nun sakina and the dal came in a single word. If we want to apply Ikhfaa, we're going to hide the nun and extend the ghunna for 2 units. Next example is min tayyibat, ta with nun sakina in 2 words. Nun sakina followed by a ta in 2 words. We apply hiding for the nun and keep the ghunna for 2 units, and it will sound like this. Min tayyibat. Another example, يومئذ زرقا. Here we have a tanween followed by a zain, harf zay, in 2 words, and we will hide the nun sakina of the tanween and keep the ghunna for 2 units. Next example is al-anfal. Here we have a nun sakina followed by a fa in a single word. If we want to hide this nun sakina, we're going to hide it and keep the ghunna for 2 units, and it will sound like this. Al-anfal. Next example, man tab. It's a ta following the nun in 2 words. So we have the nun sakina followed by a ta in 2 words. We'll hide the nun and we're going to keep the ghunna, and it will sound like this. Now, one more example, mandud. We have here the nun sakina followed by da in a single word. Now we're going to hide the nun and we're going to apply the ghunna, and it will sound like this. The last example is a dha, dhalima. Here we have a nun sakina with a dha in a single word, and if we want to hide the nun sakina and we keep the ghunna, it will sound like this. And now let's apply some practical experience on what we have just learned by trying to extract Ikhfaa from these pages of Quran and try to conclude the related Tajweed rule. So basically we're going to look for a nun sakina or tanween with the color green, and first example is min qablik, min qablik. Another example, afaman zuyyina. Third example for tanween, hasanan fa'inna, sahaban fasuqna, mayyitin fa'ahyayna, man kan, min turab. More examples. Again, looking for the green nun in a single word. فأنجيناكم وأنتم تنظرون ليلة ثم. Here we have a tanween followed by a tha. عنكم. One more here. أنفسكم. Another one. عند. And now we can conclude this lesson by summarizing it into a single slide. Ikhfaa letters are 15 letters that are summarized or grouped at the beginning of these words. صف ذا ثنى كم جاد شخص قد سما دم طيبا زد في تقى ضع ظالما. Now the rule of Ikhfaa is to hide the still nun, nun sakina, or the tanween upon meeting one of these 15 Ikhfaa letters, either in a single word or 2 words, while remember tanween only happens in 2 words. How to perform Ikhfaa? You hide the oral articulation of the nun and preserve the nasal articulation of the nun, preserving or maintaining ghunna characteristic, the nasal tone, for 2 time units. To symbolize Ikhfaa in Mushaf al-Tajweed is given a color green. Now that's given to the Nun Sakinah, which is preceding the Ikhfaa letter, or the Tanween that precedes the Ikhfaa letter. Examples were given for both Nun Sakinah in its two situations, in a single word or in two words, and for Tanween, which only happens in two words. And with this quick summary, we reach the conclusion of this lesson on Ikhfaa for Nun Sakinah and Tanween. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that بعونه وقدرته that the Quran Learning Management System برنامج الجامع لحفظ كتاب الله would help you inshallah to improve your tajweed and improve your tilawa and help you in improving your recitation and help you if you want in memorizing the Quran and to help you understand the Quran in the proper way. As we reach the end, we ask Al-Mawla Azza wa Jal أن يتقبل منا هذا العمل. We ask Allah Almighty to accept this work from us, and we ask you to make dua for those who participated in making this work come to life and reach you. Hoping you all the best. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.